कभी करती हैं मुलाकातें, कभी करती हैं मुलाकातें, कभी यादों में बरसातें, किताबें करती हैं बातें, किताबें करती हैं बातें। मन की गहरी झील में कूद जाती हैं कभी, सोच के दरिया के संग संग बहती जाती हैं कभी। चाहे शाम हो या हो रातें, किताबें करती हैं बातें।
Our guest today is Vishwajyoti Ghosh, who has curated a graphic novel called This Side, That Side, which has created quite a few ripples in India and also wherever it's been seen so far. Welcome to the program, Vishwajyoti.
Thank you. It's an honor being here.
This side, that side. Is the grass greener on the other side? Is that the concept behind it?
Well, actually, the whole construct behind this anthology was basically to talk about partition, but not what really happened then, but how subsequent generations and the second and the third generations have negotiated around it. And it's only when we go out on the streets we realize that partition is so much a part of our lives still, and it's not something that's just ended as a chapter in history books. It's something we still deal with, whether it's in our food, whether it's in the way we speak, where we come from, stories, whatever. So the whole idea was that it creates a certain amount of this side and that side, and its partition is either marked by memory or it's marked by speculation, as in, you know, what could be happening there, what would have happened had we left or had we not gone or whatever. But the third part is curiosity,
Which is the most interesting part.
which is the most interesting part, and which is the most prevalent discourse, and since it's about curiosity, you know, whether it's through our sports, whether it's through our food, culture, films, whatever, it's
And
curiosity.
also the questions you were asked from across the border about Shah Rukh Khan.
Yes, I mean, Shah Rukh Khan, how much does he charge for a film? I mean, I'm not supposed to know that, right?
Right.
So, I mean, or do you eat red meat, or do you get red meat, you know, or, you know, how are the homeopathic medicines doing there? You know, so there's so much of curiosity, and it's the same here. I mean, I was working in a studio, and I was touching up a few photographs from Lahore, and people said, "Aap Pakistan gaye the?" And then, did you see that house, and did you go to that place, you know? And they are not old people, that people of my generation. So there's so much of curiosity that still moves on from generation to generation, is something that we started with to work on this book. And as we went on, we found more stories, and every story just got more interesting. So then the whole idea of this side and that side came up.
You know, you have writers who are from all the three countries, India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, and the artists are from totally different, disparate, you know,
Backgrounds and nationalities, yes.
And in most cases, they don't even know each other.
Yes.
So now, wasn't this kind of treading on treacherous waters?
Well, you know, at one level, you see, the whole idea was this, to work with new people, and unheard people. But at the same time, it was also to deal with the form. Now, the form of graphic novel is so nascent in India, and it's practically non-existent in Bangladesh and Pakistan.
Yeah, in fact, when you say graphic novel, most people, including me, would think of a comic book or something like that.
Yes.
No?
In fact, a lot of the entries, when you opened up a call for entries, lot many people had a very cautious approach, as you know, it's a very serious story. Why do you want to do a comic out of it? Why don't you just publish it as it is? But then we had to handhold them and tell them, you know, we can work on serious stories even through a visual narrative. And as we moved on, we found artists who were interested in challenging themselves to work on a narrative, and also of cultures or places they haven't gone to. Like, for example, there's a story by a gentleman called Khadimul Islam. He's talking about he as a child escaping from Pakistan to Bangladesh. Now, it's actually illustrated by an illustrator in Calcutta who hasn't gone to Bangladesh or Pakistan, but he was intensely engaging with the author, and then they came up with references, photographs, you know, they structured a world around it, and they played around. But you know, that is one part of collaboration, which I think is a great fruitful way of collaborating, and it also opens up dialogue between two unknown people across the territories. At the same time, it was also that some people just did not contact, they just made the story on their own. For example, there's a story by Mahmood Farooqi. It's a Dastan Go, and it's been illustrated by a miniature painter in Lahore. Now she doesn't know what Dastan Go is, so I sent her a few videos. She saw them again, and then she just made the whole story into a miniature. So which was fascinating for me, and you know how they process the stories and then they visualize it, which for me was a revelation actually.
In fact, for us in India, we think everyone knows what Dastan Goi is all about.
Yeah.
So the very fact that somebody in Lahore doesn't know about Dastan Goi sounds kind of intriguing.
Also, I mean, yeah, that is also one part, and much as a lot of we don't know how what are the range miniatures can go up to.
Absolutely.
You know how contemporary miniatures can be.
And
So-
this itself is a very poignant story about a letter which is being now posted from London, because there is no direct
Yes.
contact with Pakistan, and from
Yes.
India you can't send letters to
Yeah.
Pakistan.
Which is like an hour and a half away.
Absolutely.
So that is the funny part of a partition, that you have to go via London, and then hopefully the letter will reach you. And there are so many such absurdities of our cross borders that and across the three sides, which makes partition a very real lived experience than a historical experience.
Most of the protagonists in this project are all young people. Now, in every country, in India, we have our opinion about what things are like or what people are like across the border, this side or that. Do you think these prejudices kind of are common on all sides?
Yes, to an extent, they're common on all sides, and that is also because of lack of information.
Right.
And that also leads to curiosity. I mean, had we been more open about each other, then these prejudices can really actually dissolve in a few minutes. Actually, in a few minutes, And we always keep hearing whenever a cricket team travels to Pakistan, the taxi drivers are not taking money, the restaurants are giving you free food and all that.
Yes, yes.
So they just become legends, and sometimes we feel, can we ever reciprocate? I mean, similarly with Bangladesh, I mean, how we deal so closely in terms of a culture, in terms of music and all, and and at the same time you see there are so many prejudices, that walls after walls after walls exist, even after so much of communication and information. So I think the more we open, the more we bring down the prejudices. But what was what was revealing for me was, well, while I was working in this book, is that I also found how even our memories are partitioned.
Yeah.
Totally
fragmented.
and there's a point and nothing before that and nothing after that. So
Right.
while I was working, and I was talking to a lot of young writers in Bangladesh, because I was falling short at one point of time and it was really hitting a crisis moment. And everyone said, I was not really born in 71, so I wouldn't know.
And this is now they don't even think of partition as 1947.
Exactly.
They think of it as 71.
They think of it as 71, because the whole construct of memory and nationhood starts from 71, and especially for the third or the fourth generation now. So, which is why I also use this story by Mahmood Rahman, and he talks about his family moving, and he as a child moving from Bangladesh to Bangladesh to India, and then moving back and all that. And he questions this belief that for us, why do we just cut ourselves from 47? And similarly, in other parts in the north, it ends at 47. There's so much before that, and there's so much after that, which people just shut down. And even now, there's so much of a to and fro happening, that it's such a live experience. I mean, and no book at a certain level can be the ultimate book of stories on partition, because you go out on the streets of Delhi, Karachi, Bombay, Dhaka, there are 20,000 better and more dense stories. So this is just a drop in the ocean in that sense.
The one question that obviously comes to the mind is, how many of these stories are true?
Well, I would say most of them are true, except the ones that are poetry or or Dastan Go kind of a thing. But most of them
that's based on Intezar Hussain.
That's based on Intezar Hussein's Hindustan Se Ek Khat. But most of the stories which are non-fiction are true, because some of them are real autobiographical stories, and some of them are too good to be true.
Yeah, like the beautiful One Baba Park.
One Baba Park, which is now redesigned as 90 Upper Mall. Now that's a story that actually happens in London, and they just happen to be roommates, and after a few days they realize it's the same house that they were talking about. So this family from Delhi moved to Lahore, and the family from Lahore moved to Delhi, and what they have in common is a house. And the
Yeah, so
third
this family
generation
lived
meets.
in that house in
Yes.
Lahore, and now this boy's family lives in that same house.
Yes, so
Martand and
Martand
Rafi.
and Rafi. So
Yeah.
Rafi's grandfather got this house when he moved, and it's just a coincidence that they become roommates in London. So
And they become very good friends
and
before they
are very
discover
good
that.
friends, and they are very good friends. Even before they discovered, but the fact remains that it's a bond of a lifetime now.
Yes, yeah.
So every
And how
time we get
crazy
together-
is that to kind of discover this kind of a past?
I mean, I think it's the best coincidence I've ever seen. I mean,
Yeah.
it's better than a Manmohan Desai film, as we said.
Yeah.
So in that sense, and it's a very lived thing. I mean, even now, when I was working on making the story, and they were interacting with each other, I saw how they vibe. So I mean, it just breaks down all kinds of partition.
Yes, but isn't it true that the moment you go into the diaspora, the moment people become NRIs, the bonding is different anyway. So you find a lot of the Indians and Pakistanis who are in America or in the UK, they tend to bond because of a common cultural and language background.
True. I think that's where the whole construct of partition fails.
Right.
Right now, if
Yeah.
I'm traveling in Europe, I can now today, as a Delhiite, I can actually travel without saying a word of English, because I can
True.
find a Punjabi and I can find a Bangladeshi and I can converse in both. So and it actually breaks down all borders. So similarly, I mean, Beena Silva talks about it. When it's a cricket match and Pakistan's playing, Indians start wearing Pakistan shirts and start cheering for the team.
Right.
And
Yeah.
vice versa.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of the diaspora also becomes that it's a shared diaspora after a point.
Right.
In most of the Indian restaurants in Europe, they're Pakistani cooks.
True.
So so what are we talking about? How is your dal makhani different from mine?
These beautiful stories, most of them are true, very, very heartwarming stories. Were there also stories which were kind of more poignant and sad, which...
Well, there is a very poignant story by Salman Rushdie, and Salman Rushdie is a well-known travel writer in Lahore, and I was actually asking him to work on the story that which is something that's happened in his life, which is when he came to Amritsar to meet the person whose family had a hand in killing one of his family members.
Oh.
So he wanted to interview him, and he met that person, and that person told him that after that act, when he moved to India, that gentleman had lost his mental balance, and it's something that sight of his own act kept coming to him. But Mr. Rashid couldn't work on that particular story because he's working on a long form, and it's a big book, and So we were just talking, and then he called me up, and when he called me up, of all places, I was driving in Lajpat Nagar, which is for me the ultimate South Delhi partition hub.
Yeah.
And he called me up and he started narrating me the story. He said, "Look, I have another story, and this is how it goes." And while he was narrating the story, he broke down. So it was an interview that he had through just a commoner in Amritsar. It was just simple as that, but it was such a poignant moment in his life that it's lived with him. And when we finally made the pages and we shared it with him, and he just replied, "I cried." So it's something that he has lived with. So and there are many poignant stories. Some had to be dropped because they were long form, and within a certain visual framework we have a certain limitation, and we intentionally kept short stories so that we could include more stories. And the more stories we would have, the more fresher of the voices we would have, and most of them have never done graphic novels before. So they were free to interpret graphic novels the way they would choose to, which makes a very liberating experience, because there is no burden of a panel or a speech balloon or a thought blurb or something that a conventional comic has. So if you want to do poetry, but do it in a visual form. So for me, that was a very engaged experience with the authors.
So did you have to engage with them a lot, or was it a kind of one-time instruction manual and they said, okay, fine, we've understood the concept?
No, the one-time instruction manual was tried, but it failed. And like every partition story, every story is very new story, and it has to be handled with a different lens. So when I was working with some poems over there, different artists had a very different take on it.
Right. Yeah.
And then wanted to know which style works best for what. And hopefully, I hope it's worked.
Right.
Having said that, it's interesting to see how authors also then challenge themselves to move beyond a certain brief.
Right.
Because after a point we realize that the brief is meaningless. Yeah, you know,
Totally.
let people just tell their own stories their own way.
Yeah.
The only brief that I had was that the book is black and white, and there are a certain number of pages you can go up to and no further, which I think everyone followed. So,
And what was the reason for black and white?
what
Do you
was the
think it
reason
was
for
kind
black
of
and white?
darker and kind of more gritty somehow?
No, I didn't want to make it a very darker or a gritty thing. But at the same time, you know what happens in a book like in an anthology like this is there are as many styles,
Right.
and it can lead a very intense riot of colors across the book, and becomes a bit tough for the reader.
Or do you think it takes away from the sobriety really, or the depth of the story somewhere?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I mean, people also work with mature colors. But having said that, you know, it just a bit calmer on the eye, because the stories anyway are very intense,
Right.
and that engage and demand from the reader. So you know, it was also a certain visual relief.
You know, when you say calmer on the eye, that I think is a personal perspective, because somehow black and white appears to have more shades of grey, and therefore more stark, and therefore more hard hitting. Don't you think?
Sometimes yes, I mean there are some stories in this book which are really hard hitting, and I think that's artists have very intentionally kept it very hard hitting.
Yeah, and the strokes are kind of
the strokes
harder.
are gritty, and you know,
Yeah.
and even the faces are very solid and stoic. And
yeah.
those are some. I mean,
Right.
but you know, I mean, the thing with it's tougher to do black and white.
Yes, it is.
It's tougher to do black and white because you have to retain a visual interest from page 1 to page 16.
Right.
Otherwise, it has the chances of getting into monotony. So for me, it was also to work with as many different sorts of black and whites, because you know, every story has a very different style.
True.
And there are some places where people have used photographs, and there people have used just drawings. So you know, it makes the book a bit more elaborate and stretched.
This form of the graphic novel is not new to you, because you've done Delhi Calm, right? Why did you think of doing partition stories in this particular? Where did this idea come to you?
Actually, this particular book was actually conceived by the publisher Pita Das and Farah Batul from the Goethe Institute, who have supported this project.
Right.
And I have been engaged with partition narratives for at least 10 years now. In fact, one of the first books that I wanted to write much before Delhi Calm was this book on partition and my own family thing on that. But once I started working on it, I realized how inadequate I am. I'm just such a small little voice, and you know, kind of the range of stories that I have lived with, and being a Delhi person, you know, it's something you've lived with, so
Right.
many stories, and you know, and you want to carry them all, you know,
Yes.
so you're greedy.
And you've heard a lot of stories from your mom also.
My mom, grandmother, my friends from Punjab, you know, whom I grew up with, and you know, every time anyone used to open in childhood, you know, pata hai mere dadaji ke paas, you know what the next line is, right?
Right.
I mean, I remember in this in our childhood, there was this case of this woman. It was a clear case of goiter.
Right.
But the legend that went around this whole area was that when she was crossing from Pakistan to India, she gulped all her jewelry. You know, so you know, we have lived with those stories, so we want to use those stories.
So now with this book, are you having book reading sessions where
Yes.
people can kind of use this as a cathartic experience?
Yeah. Yes, we are having sessions in colleges. We are having sessions in various places, and we
Right.
want to always open up the session at the end to people to come and tell their own stories.
So what has the experience been?
We've
so
just
far?
started, so
Right.
hopefully, as we gather momentum, we will come out with more stories where you can put up on a blog, because you know, there's so many stories.
You know, the gist of this entire thing of restoring partition is in the last segment of the book,
Making faces.
Making Faces. That's so beautiful. Just share it with us.
Making faces is something a friend Arijit Sen, who's a veteran graphic novelist, came up with. He was working on different forms, and he said, "What do I do?" And then he said, "You know, that's the strongest point of partition for me, is that, you know, you have these faces, and then you cut them from the middle, and then you can keep making as many different faces." And we actually did a count, and we can make 128 faces out of these 4 pages.
128.
128 faces out of these 4 pages. So you know, so every face is a new story. So that's the whole idea of restoring partition, is that we revisit partition and we restore it, then just restore it.
Do you think this is really you know, an idealistic exercise? Will it really kind of cut away from the harsh memories, the cynicism? Do you think it is a step towards changing that?
I can just hope that this is a tool to demystify. I can just hope that this can be a tool to open dialogues. I can hope, like collaborators have started opening and talking to each other, I can hope this book becomes a just small little token to talk.
Well, amen to that, Vishwajyoti. I'm
Thank you.
sure that this book is going to change the thought process for.
Hope so, yeah. I mean, at least begin to open up and talk.
Absolutely. Thanks so much
Thank
for
you so
being on our
much.
program.
Thank you.
I'm reading a short excerpt from my book, The Other Side of Silence. And the excerpt is from an interview taken with a woman called Damayanti Sehgal, who used to work in the Hoshiarpur camp for abducted women. And at some point, Damayanti Sehgal and her co-workers decide to try and help all the women in the camp to get jobs. But there is a government rule which says that anybody who's over the age of 28 cannot get a job. And this is one of my favorite excerpts where Damayanti describes what she does to get these women affidavits so that they can get jobs. So there are some 80 women in the camp, and she tells her staff first to count the women, and then she says, I told the staff that there is a government rule that anyone over the age of 28 can't get a job. I don't know what the logic was, but that was the rule. So we did some rough calculations, because most of the women were older than this age, some were almost the age of 80. So we did some rough calculations. We took off some time for the educational opportunities some of the women had lost, and then a year for something else, and a few months for job searching, and then tried to see how many women fit the bill. But my workers said, Benji, these lists have now become very small. I said, how will we find them jobs? Make these lists bigger. They said, but how? I said, just do it, orders are orders. They all looked at me thinking Benji has gone mad. Then we had to get some affidavits done of the women's ages. I went to the magistrate, to the assistant deputy commissioner, who was called Mr. Puri. I telephoned him and I said, I need to come and see you, and he said, please do come. What is it you need? I told him that I needed to get some affidavits signed. He said, what sort of affidavits? So I told him that these women had to take the exam for the 8th standard, and this was their first entry, and we needed an age certificate. He said, these women's age, where are they? Bring them here. The women were outside. I said, why do you need to see the women? He said, if I'm signing the affidavit, I need to see them. I tried to dissuade him. He said, don't be funny, I have to see the women. I said, for what? He said, am I being funny or are you? I said, you want to see the women? You have to sign the affidavit, that's all. He said, Miss Sehgal, you're a strange person, at least bring the women in. I said, all right, if you insist. So we brought the women in, and then she tells me laughing, poor man, we had written down their ages as 12, 18, 14. He looked at them and said, these are the women? They are these ages? I said, listen, you signed the paper, why are you wasting your time and mine? What does it matter? He said, Miss Sehgal, look at that woman, her hair is white. I said, congratulations, well done. Don't you know that people's hair goes white even at a young age? Today, even 12-year-olds have grey hair. Haven't you seen any? I can show you lots. Today, one can't rely on hair at all. You never know when it might go grey, even at age 12. Look at that one, he said, she has no teeth. Oh ho, I said, you have such sharp eyes for a man. I said to her, Bibi, you fell down from the roof, did you not, the other day? She said, yes, Benji, and all my teeth broke. What could I do? He said, Miss Sehgal, you are trying to make a fool of me. I said, Puri Sahab, the girls are in front of you. You can see the truth for yourself. Why should I fool you? He said, they have wrinkles. I said to him, how observant you are. You notice so many things. Then I said, look, Puri Sahab, tell me what you ate at home this morning. He said, so now you're trying to turn the tables on me. I said, no, I genuinely want to know what you had for breakfast this morning. You must have had milk, fruit, toast, butter on it, eggs, all this at least your wife must have given you. This much I can tell you, more I don't know. And me too, I had plenty. But look at these poor women, they get nothing. The government gives them 10 rupees. What can they eat with this? They have to starve. That's why their faces are so wrinkled. Once they get enough to eat, they'll be all right. He said, you're a real jatti. look at these women, one has no teeth, another has grey hair, a third is wrinkled. I said, oh ho, Puri Saab, what is it you want? He said, tell me the correct age of these women. I said, okay, you write what you want, and I'll accept what you write. How? He said. Why not? I said. Use your pen, take an oath, write when they were born, and I will believe you. He said, how do I know? So I said, if you don't know, how do I? You will also put down an estimate, so will I. I said, have you seen their faces? They come from the village. Do you think even one of them knows her birth date? What do they know, these women? They will tell you lies. I am also lying. You also have to give a false signature. Since we are all liars together, none of us will speak. Do you think these women can say when they were born? Neither can I. I was not there, nor were you, so what can we do? For 45 minutes, we argued and argued. He said, what should I do? I said, I know nothing. I'm doing this in God's name. Why don't you do the same? I told him, if you can swear when they were born, which hour, which day, I'll take your word for it and countersign it. But you don't know, neither do I. If you can't, I can't. He signed, and with these, all these women got excellent results.